Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of Your Invisible Future Edge. This is the series where we're exploring the psychology behind future readiness. Uh, our specific focus has been what is it that makes leaders future ready? And by being future ready, what we mean is being able to understand a world that's changing so fast and spot opportunities within this. So today's episode is about the curiosity map. For the past year, my team of researchers and I have been digging in really deep into the psychology literature to understand different factors that allow leaders to be future ready. And one of the most interesting findings for us was that while we've often heard about how important curiosity is, one of the things that we hadn't realized till we had gone deep into the literature was how curiosity itself is not one thing. And different leaders can therefore choose to be curious in many, many different ways. So today's episode is going to focus on just that. The curiosity map. Let me ask you a question. Supposing I ask you a simple trivia question, and that trivia question is something like, what is the only mammal you know who's capable of flight? Or I ask you a question like, what instrument measures atmospheric pressure? Is that something that would make you curious? Now, researchers found something very interesting, that when people know nothing about a topic, actually, they aren't curious about it at all. When they know the answer, they're again not curious for very obvious reasons. But when they almost know an answer, my God, that's when their curiosity is really at its peak. So the kind of curiosity I just described, where I asked you a question and you may have been wondering what the answer is close to what we call in the psychology field curiosity D, or penetrative curiosity. So let me speak about what this means for us. Some of us are curious by nature and love to explore new fields. We don't want to just focus on, one field. We're very interested in what's happening in the area of technology, what's happening perhaps in geopolitics, what's happening in areas which might be quite diverse and different from ours, like unrelated industries, or even the arts, music, theater, movies. And we're able to connect dots in ways that aren't at all obvious to most people. On the other hand, there are others who enjoy going really deep in one area of exploration. And their joy comes from solving a puzzle that they could see and nobody else could. So there are two kinds of curiosity: explorative curiosity, which looks at what else is emerging and has the capacity to move across domains. It in many ways expands the frame by connecting fields that very few would have otherwise connected. And there is penetrative curiosity, which is a bit like puzzle solving, like people who just can't rest till they have all the answers. What does this mean for leaders? Now, this is where things get quite interesting. What it means for leaders is that the kind of opportunities that leaders are able to spot depends on what's the shape and form their curiosity takes. So if you look at what happened about 10 years ago, where Geo launched by completely changing the rules of telecom, that's an example of exploratory curiosity, where a fundamental question about what drives the business model within telecom itself was almost upended. And even today, other players within the telecom industry are perhaps just struggling to keep pace with just how much the frame itself has changed. What about leaders who are focused on penetrative curiosity? And here's what we find, that they too spot opportunities, because at the end of the day, if you go really, really deep into any area, you'll be able to spot how the world is changing and what opportunities arise from these change. It's just that the kinds of solutions you will come up are different. And here's an example of what penetrative curiosity might look like in action. The Asian Paints example Asian Paints, as we know, for decades has been a market leader in the area of paints. But here's something that they discovered as they went deeper, that people weren't just buying paint; they were buying a new, a new design for their house, a new space. And by understanding how the thinking behind the purchase of paint itself had changed, they launched a whole new line of business which revolved around consulting for colors and home transformation. So both explorative curiosity and penetrative curiosity do lead to very different kinds of discoveries, and this is what today's episode is about. In a sense, people or leaders who are very high on explorative curiosity, they expand their frame by asking questions like, what else is possible here? Um, are we even in the right industry? Can we fundamentally change the rules of the game? Uh, what is the boundary of where we are operating? They expand the frame. On the other hand, those leaders who are focused on the other kind of curiosity, penetrative curiosity, ask much more discerning questions on one specific area. Are we missing something about the system? What here is emerging that's still very, very subtle, and maybe other people, practitioners in the same field, haven't quite understood? What is hiding in plain sight? So, for leaders, there are these two very, very different kinds of curiosity at play. And for those of you who are watching, I would love to know which form seems natural to you. Are you someone who's drawn to change across many fields? Are you someone who's curious about how what's happening in one field can impact your field? Are you someone who loves to perhaps read very widely, interact with people who are very, very different? Or are you someone who loves to solve a puzzle by going deep into one specific area and almost not resting till you find an answer around an area that intrigues you? I do have a very special guest here today who will be joining me. We were having a little bit of technology challenges before we started the episode, so I'm really hoping that it works this time round. He's someone who is exceptional in exploratory curiosity. And let me welcome Vijay to the stage. Hi, Vijay. Oh, I still can't hear you though. Yes, yes, say something. No, I can't hear you. Can I ask the viewers if can you hear Vijay? We seem to be having a technical challenge with the audio. Uh, Dr. Pranima, I like to see and understand the dialogue. Oh, wow, wonderful. So you're a great example of someone who's very strong in exploratory curiosity. Hi, Aman. Hi, Asif. Hi, Ringsil, and thank you so much. Tanmay, you get curious about many things, and when I find something really interesting, I tend to go deep, almost on the intersection of exploratory and penetrative curiosity. Actually, that makes a lot of sense, Tanmay. And one of the things we find with founders who are exceptionally skilled is that what often allows them to see an emerging opportunity is explorative curiosity, but what allows them to then scale that opportunity is penetrative curiosity. And what's interesting is that these two forms of curiosity actually activate very different parts of the brain. So if you're someone who is very, very interested in exploring new areas, seeing what's at the intersection of different fields, and is able to connect the dots in very unusual ways, uh, your dopamine circuit within the brain, there's specific parts of the brain that respond to a neurotransmitter called dopamine. Your reward centers in the brain are really, really active. And for those of you who are very interested in solving puzzles, it's an entirely different part of the brain that is active. It is the part of the brain that feels almost discomfort till you get to the bottom of something and are able to resolve a question that is on your mind. Hi, Vineet, Atul, Hariram, Deepa. Hi, Aditi. I can see a lot of people are resonating with exploratory curiosity, and that's absolutely wonderful. So here's the interesting thing. The kinds of questions that people who are high on exploratory curiosity ask are fundamentally different from the kinds of questions that those who are high in penetrative curiosity ask. And that's why it's really helpful to understand where you naturally lean. Now, many of us can actually operate in either, but often have a natural home. And that's the home which we default to when we are at ease, or even when we are under stress, actually. So very often we have a natural home. For me, it's exploratory curiosity. I'm super interested in many fields, many of which have nothing to do with each other, but somewhere at the end of the day, I am able to see parallels that at least I think are quite helpful. I don't know what others feel. On the other hand, people who are very high in penetrative curiosity are able to see subtle shifts that speak to their absolute depth in a system and are able to see emerging opportunities right from there. I'm going to take some of the questions that have come up. Thank you so much for these questions. I really, really appreciate it. Hari asked how to trigger curiosity. Now, here's the thing. You can trigger your curiosity in two different ways, and I'm just going to show you a little bit of how. So let's say your natural style is you lean exploratory. Then, if you want to develop your penetrative curiosity, what you need to do is to spend so much time in a domain that you're able to see subtle shifts that those who don't have that much depth in an area would somehow miss. Look at operational data, not just trends and ideas, and build depth before expanding. So this is if you are naturally an exploratory, a curious person. On the other hand, if your natural home is to be, deep in one field and it's penetrative curiosity, then the recommendation for you is actually quite different. To schedule structured exposure completely outside your industry, to look at emerging adjacencies, unconventional players. So in a sense, what we are saying is that both kinds of curiosity use very different parts of the brain and are activated very differently. They also have many, many consequences for what are the kinds of questions we tend to explore, what gets us interested. And if you are naturally strong on one, becoming aware of that tells you where your natural strengths lie. And it also gives you the opportunity to perhaps develop your strengths in another area if that is something that is of interest to you. What makes you curious more generally? Now, here's one of the things that scientists have discovered. There are very specific triggers for curiosity, and there are two different kinds for the two different kinds of curiosity. For those who are high on exploratory curiosity, because remember I said exploratory curiosity works significantly with the neurotransmitter dopamine. It's the dopamine reward circuit. So, novelty, new ideas, exploration, seeing things that nobody has seen before. And interestingly, somehow this form of curiosity is very well correlated with your appreciation for beauty and aesthetics. Now, don't ask me how they work so specifically, but my sense is perhaps it activates a similar part of the brain, and which is why people who are very high on exploratory curiosity tend to appreciate aesthetics and, connecting the dots in unusual ways. On the other hand, what activates penetrative curiosity or the capacity to go deeper and deeper and deeper is something which is almost the opposite. It is discomfort. Discomfort with an understanding that I may have about an area. Um, if I know a lot about an area, but there's something that just doesn't quite make sense as yet. Like, for instance, something has changed about, let's say in a business context, the kind of customer who's buying my product, or the manner in which that customer is buying my product, or maybe the states which are buying my product, or the use to which my product is being, put to. It may not show up in a quarterly sales statement, which perhaps looks at much higher level figures, but it'll continue to bother me till I understand that. So people who are high on penetrative curiosity are driven by a drive to fully understand something and not being able to almost rest till they feel they have solved something that is on their mind and is bothering them. On the other hand, as I said, exploratory curiosity is driven by the dopamine or the reward circuit within the brain, and novelty, aesthetics, newness of ideas is a significant driver of it. Here's something interesting. When people looked at the brain scans of people as they were exposed to different images, a very interesting finding emerged. Images that were really simple don't get people very curious, actually. They don't release anything in the brain. On the other hand, very unusual images, images that surprise you in some way, are the ones that evoke curiosity. And here's a fun fact. Things that get us curious are the things that give us persistence in our mission. So whether it is exploratory curiosity and the persistence in that, connecting dots in unusual ways, or whether it is penetrative curiosity, which is about getting to the bottom of a problem and not being able to almost rest till you have solved it completely, either way, what's at play here is this inability to maybe, to feel at ease till you have sorted this out for yourself. We also know that curiosity is quite linked to your motivation to persist on a task and remember information. So if you're curious about this topic, for instance, you will remember what is being discussed in this podcast. On the other hand, if you just happen to catch this live, but actually have no real curiosity or interest about curiosity, then you aren't likely to remember what is being discussed. So this is our conversation on curiosity, the two kinds of curiosity: exploratory, penetrative, what it means for us as business leaders, and what you can do to understand your own home base, as well as perhaps develop an alternative form of curiosity. If you have any questions, hi Jaipal, Nitin, Aditi, so nice to see all of you here. Thank you so much for joining. Do post your question. Here, I see a lot of you are interested in exploratory curiosity. Is there someone here who resonates with penetrative curiosity? Do let me know. Hi, Jaipal, from Rajasthan. All right. So with that, we're coming to the end of our conversation today. If this is something that is of interest to you, or you think this is something that is of interest to someone you know, maybe tag that person in the comments. That will give them an opportunity to revisit this in their own time and watch the replay. And if this is something of interest to you, join us for our next podcast. Our next episode 3, will be 2 weeks from now, Friday at noon, and we will be discussing the pattern trap. Remember, we're speaking about the psychology of future readiness. Episode 1, and if you missed that, then just go to my profile on LinkedIn, look at the events tab, and you'll find episode 1. In episode 1, we spoke about conformity and how the desire for conformity sometimes comes in the way of us exploring new ideas. So if that's something you really want to understand within yourself, that's a good episode to go to. Um, if you're interested in curiosity, it's today's episode. And in the next episode, we're going to speak about our need for pattern recognition, something as interesting as seeing patterns perhaps before they're completely clear, because not being able to recognize change makes us uncomfortable. So, we're going to speak about the pattern trap and how that comes in the way of leaders getting future ready. And if that's something of interest to you, please join us next time. So, with that, thank you so much. Thank you for joining.